In this edition of the History Channel's 47-part series on the Supreme Court, we will take an in-depth look at the Warren Court, the Civil Rights Court. First things first, let's get to know our key judges. John Marshall II, William J. Brennan, Jr., Charles Evans Whittaker, Potter Stewart, Byron White, Arthur Goldberg, Abe Fortas, Thurgood Marshall, and your MVJ, Most Valuable Judge, Earl Warren. Earl Warren was appointed Chief Justice in 1953. He was a conservative who was the governor of California and the Republican vice president nominee in 1948. However, during his term in the Supreme Court, he followed many liberal ideals.
During the era of the Warren Court, the civil rights movement began to escalate. Practicing judicial activism, these landmark cases teach us about the struggle of civil rights during the 1950s and 60s. The Supreme Court under Chief Justice Earl Warren vastly helped push for true equality. Earl Warren's Supreme Court decisions helped keep the momentum of civil rights activists going strong. The first major landmark case was Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. It was about state laws segregating public schools. In a unanimous decision, the Warren Court found that these separate but equal facilities were unequal. This decision overturned the Plessy v. Ferguson decision of 1896. The court found that segregation violated the Equal Protection Clause from the 14th Amendment. As a result, 20 states need to desegregate their public schools. A second landmark case was Heart of Atlanta Motel v. United States of 1964. The Heart of Atlanta Motel refused to serve African Americans. This case was the first challenge to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which stated that there could be no discrimination in public places. The Warren Court concluded that the act did not violate any of the constitutional amendments. The motel played a significant role in interstate commerce, and since Congress controlled this, they had a right to implement such laws. A third and final case is South Carolina v. Katzenbach of 1966. In this case, South Carolina challenged the Voting Rights Act of 1965 provision that required states to change congressional districts. The court found that the act was constitutional. Earl Warren's opinion stated that the Voting Rights Act was a valid exercise of Congress's power under the 15th Amendment's Enforcement Clause.
The landmark decisions Earl Warren faced were cases predominantly dealing with civil rights. Earl Warren's decisions helped push for total equality like the Constitution states. During this era, the American people and the Supreme Court both held different ideas for the future. The American people still felt segregation was okay, while the Supreme Court disagreed. In the case of Brown v. Board of Education, the Supreme Court justices voted unanimously to end the segregation in schools across America. South Carolina disagreed so much so that they challenged the Supreme Court in a 1966 court case of South Carolina v. Katzenbach. The Supreme Court upheld their own decision using a rare case of original jurisdiction. Even though the American public disagreed, the populace had to comply with the Supreme Court's ruling. Now with this push, civil rights activists could create a movement that would win over the American populace.
So, are we, the History Channel, fans of this period? Of course! The decisions made by the Warren Court increased the rights for African Americans and ensured equality for all.